In this episode, 3 become 2. We discuss camera features we like to have in our camera. I don't use my histogram, but I explain the reasons why. Gareth talks about pixel shifting. Don't worry, that confused the hell out of me too. In this time of lockdown, grab yourself a glass of wine, untighten your belt a notch or two, sit back and enjoy another episode of The Photo Nerds. Just a small disclaimer, please note that this podcast was recorded nearly 3 weeks ago now. And from Paul, from Gareth and from myself as well, I certainly hope everybody is bearing up under these very stressful times. And everybody out there, from the three of us, stay safe. Problem is now though, you've got a side profile shot of me with my big nose.
Oh, no matter where we sit or where the cameras are going to get a profile shot of your big nose, mate. It's just the way it's going to happen. No matter where I put that camera. Is it me or does it feels like there's somebody missing?
Feels great, doesn't it?
Just the two of us, I think.
We should have a candle.
Where's that
we should
wine?
have lit a candle.
We ordered that wine ages ago. Where's that wine? Right. Yeah, so Paul couldn't feature on this podcast today. So let's talk about Paul.
Because his wife rang and said, basically, get home now.
One of those big thumbs came down.
Absolutely.
He's got one of them, what they call them? What's that word begins with an R? Response? Something like that, response. Responsibilities or something like that. Yeah, so he couldn't be here. Never mind. So I've driven all the way back up to Manchester again for the fourth time. That's
Yeah, we should have been down to you.
I know, you should have. But anyway, it couldn't happen. So in fact, you were down in Wales the day before. So
yesterday, last night.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to another podcast. Before we get going, I only thought of this the other night. This mirrorless thing. Yep. It never dawned on me before, but the reason why I've never considered buying a mirrorless camera, and it's because of what you said. Oh, that's just typical.
Is it important?
Are you still filming? Let's put this straight on to
flight mode, as opposed to train mode, which it just sounds like a train. It's just gone off
train mode.
Take it off train mode and put it on flight mode.
You said to me that in your EVF. You love your EVF because you use the histogram.
Yeah.
And it hadn't dawned on me before, but I never used the histogram. Never used the histogram. Never. Except for landscape photography, because I call landscape photography lazy landscape photography, because you got time. So I'm talking about in my professional capacity. So in other words,
by professional you mean weddings, you mean portraits?
Yeah, so in other words, when I'm in the studio or when I shoot weddings, I do everything off a light meter. Everything. In which case, the light is read by me using a light meter, and I never have to touch the camera apart from to dial in my shutter speed, aperture and my ISO. I never have to verify, never check, never do this thing that you call chimping. I never look at the back of my camera to look at the image. I just simply take a light meter reading and take the picture.
Right, but when you obviously...
That's how I work, and that's how I've worked forever.
Which is a very long time.
Absolutely. So the point I'm making is, if you work my way,
the old way,
whichever way you want, it doesn't matter what camera I'm using. A mirrored camera, a mirrorless camera, or a film camera, it makes no difference, because photography is a science. So I'm working with the science of photography more than I am chimping. I don't chimp.
But I mean, obviously, when you come to edit an image, you're obviously in Lightroom or whatever you Photoshop or however you edit. You're obviously using the histogram to edit the image.
No.
So how do you?
I use my eyes.
So to find white.
I do have my my blinkers in Photoshop. I do, the top right hand side with the histogram. I do use the histogram. I don't use the histogram. In other words, I don't push it as far to the right as I possibly can. But I'll push it until I get blinkers, then I know I've gone too far.
Yeah, the funny thing about blinkers, my experience of editing, is by the time the blinkers have come on, it already looks to the eye that it's clipped.
That's correct.
So the detail there, you just can't see it.
That's correct. It's generally lost.
So it already looks white where it perhaps shouldn't be.
Yes.
So the person, the end product is going to be looking at an image, and they say, well, that's clipped. Well, actually, no, if you see the histogram, it's not, but it looks it because it's really white.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, when I take a photograph, my experience is different to yours, because obviously using an EVF, and even on the little Fuji X100 series, you've got the histogram in the OVF. So, big advantage for mirrorless cameras for me is is being able to see when I'm nearly clipping or where, because sometimes obviously you need to clip, because obviously you might have reflections or something in a photograph.
That's correct. High key, low key in the studio.
Reflections off a commercial product, that sort of thing. So sometimes the histogram is there to tell you what's clipping, and then you know what's clipping, so you can respond to it. So you're not underexposing and putting pressure on your sensor later on. But no, I don't chimp anymore. I think street photography's taught me that it's not a good idea to take a photograph, then look at the back of the screen to see whether or not, because your screen's not accurate, is it? So you explain how you would meter. I mean, you've got your camera in your hand, you turn up to a wedding, you stand at the altar, you've got the groom there. How do you meter that with a light meter? What do you do? You've got your camera on set to, I don't know, landscape mode. So how would you go into manual, as in your f8, your long exposure, whatever you used your camera previously for? Sorry.
So I work everything off a light meter. So let's say if we're going to do the group shots, if I'm going to shoot the groom, let's say for instance I'm going to shoot the groom by the window. So we're going to do some window light photography with the groom. They're generally the first shots that we do, or with the bride against the window to do window light photography. So I'm going to take my light meter up to where I'm going to stand the groom, aim my light meter towards the light source, take a light meter reading, then put that information into my camera and take pictures.
Is that effectively a spot meter? But because of the way the histogram, the light meter's working, is it an area, or is it a spot? Is it quite a concentrated meter, or what?
No, it's called it's just reflective. It's incidental light metering, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's reading the light falling onto the subject and not reflecting off the subject. So therefore also it bypasses the fact that you could have a subject with dark skin or light skin, or a bride's dress could be bright white, and the groom's, I mean, we're talking bride and groom stuff here, but I do this in all walks. So that includes studio. Obviously in a studio,
you kind of know your settings in a studio.
I do know my settings in the studio, but I'll always double check by using my light meter. Always. You know how anybody can set lights up. Yes, I can set lights up without using a light meter. Of course I can. I've been doing it for long enough. However, photography is a science. You've got the tools to make sure that science is right. So why not use them?
So when you're teaching photography, do you teach landscape photography, and you teach weddings as well, don't you? Yes. So when you're teaching landscape photography, you would use the histogram in your camera, or you still use a light meter?
No, on landscape photography, because you've generally got time, then I'll use my histogram then.
So, but because you're on a 5D Mark III, aren't you?
5D Mark III.
So you take a photograph, and obviously you can't see a histogram as you're taking the picture.
Yeah,
or you can. Oh, you can.
Yeah, of course, can you?
Oh, right, I don't remember.
Yeah, Canon's not that quite.
No, I had a 5D III. I don't remember.
Yes.
Maybe I did. So you can't see the histogram.
5D Mark III, you can't until after you've taken a picture, which is really bizarre.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Then you take the picture first. Then
with the 5D Mark II, did I just say that the right way around?
Right.
I might have just said that wrong.
Maybe I didn't have the 3 then. Maybe I didn't. Yeah. I thought I had the 3.
No, the 5D Mark III, you could see it's a live histogram.
Okay, so you teach people to expose using the histogram on landscape, but if they were learning a wedding, you teach them how to meter using a light meter. So for someone who's never done I've never ever shot a wedding and meter with a light meter. If a bride's standing in the sun and she's wearing a white dress, obviously, and obviously the groom's next to her in a dark suit, where would you put? Because if it was a darker skinned bride, how do you still put the light meter near the face?
Yes, even though it doesn't matter the clothes, the color of the clothes they're wearing or the color of their skin. It makes no difference.
But how would the light meter know how reflective the dress is?
It wouldn't. That's the art form. That's the art form with a light meter. It gives you a true reading of how much light is falling onto the subject. I'll give you an example.
But only the skin area.
No, it's wherever you hold the light meter.
What I'm talking about in this example, you put the light meter by the lady's face.
Yeah, that's it.
And then you click that away from the face, literally like that, and then you take that reading, you put that in your camera. But then if I put that light meter down in the brightest part of the dress where the sun's hitting it, would those?
No, it's the same light.
But the dress is very reflective, isn't it?
But it makes a difference. Try it. It works perfect.
Oh, right.
There's no such thing as anything overexposed. I'll give you an example.
You would never clip it then, basically, because you're spot metering something that's potentially dark.
That's
correct. Is what I'm trying to work out.
If you go to the car park now and you shoot a white car and a black car, okay, you hold your camera up.
That's right. Yeah, good way of doing it.
And you look at a white car, and all of a sudden you'll get your exposure right in camera. Then you turn your camera to a black car, and what happens is telling you now everything's grossly underexposed. or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
With a light meter, it ignores the color of the car. It just tells you exactly how much light is falling on to the subject. So then you would just simply adjust your camera according to how much light is falling onto the subject, and therefore you get an equal balance.
But that's a spot meter as opposed to like an area.
Yeah, I suppose it is a spot meter as such. Yeah.
All right. So if you used your camera in the same way as the light meter, you'd put your camera in, say, auto mode, put it in aperture priority or something like that. So you put your camera in aperture priority, you've gone into spot metering. So that's now using the most of the center of your OVF to meter. So if you pointed that at the car, you'd have to use
like 3% or something. Spot metering, I think, is about 3%.
No, it's the rest of the scene. The spot metering is like most of the scene. So
no, spot metering is spot metering.
Yeah. So spot metering is most of the scene, like 90% of the center, right? So because that you use the center of your camera to spot meter, okay?
You're saying 90% of the
center.
The center, right? Okay, center.
Yeah, the circle in the middle, right? So obviously this isn't how I shoot. So I'm trying to think back to the long time ago when I did do spot metering. Right. So if I point,
that's not right.
Why?
Because if you put your camera's metering to spot metering, you're only reading around about 3 to 5% of the center of your frame, and not the center of the big square in the middle. It's literally only about 3 or 5% of the center of the image, or wherever your focus is. If you move the focus point.
I think I've read about this. Because you did something on a photo shoot with me once.
Yes.
So you showed me where your focus point is. That's where it'll meter.
Yes.
Now on my cameras, I've got a circle in the middle, which actually shows the spot metering area.
Sure.
Right. So that would clearly say that. Obviously, it's a small part of the viewfinder, so it's like a quarter of the size of the viewfinder, I suppose, if you wanted to work it out. But the metering would be done on that entire area, very, very small from the rest of.
They might work in a slightly different way.
But
then,
if you put your camera on spot metering mode and pointed at the black car, you'd obviously have to use exposure compensation to tell it that that's a black car, because otherwise it's going to think, oh, this is dark, that should be 20% grey, and it would overexpose. Therefore, anything that was white around that car would be clipped.
Yeah,
absolutely no chance. So you would rely on the compensation dial there to tell it that this is black, so I need to underexpose by 2 stops because it's black.
Yeah, but you're saying you're saying that's how I would. I don't work.
No,
like that.
No, I know you don't. I'm saying to try to use a camera because I've never used a light meter. So if I was going to use a camera as a light meter in spot metering mode like you do, and you use the black car as an example. So now when I go to the white car, I've got to put it above 2 stops or a stop and a half because the camera's going to think it's 20% grey again. So the camera's you're going to have to use a compensation dial and say, well, okay, polar bear in the snow sort of scenario, everything's going to come out grey, so I've got to go a stop and a half to 2 stops to compensate. So if I put my camera in spot metering mode and went to a black car, it's going to think this should be grey. So I'd have to use a compensation dial. Yeah. So you're saying with your metering mode in your I forgot the word.
Light meter.
Light meter, that's the word, yeah. So if with your light meter, you don't have to do that because it knows that it ignores the fact that it's black and it can just tell.
That's correct. I've got my light meter there. Yeah. There's 2 modes that you can, it's incidental and reflective. So you can read light like your light meter does in your camera. That's reflective light metering. You can use a light meter for that. So if I wanted to take a light meter reading of the sky, for instance, then I would have to set my light meter to reflective, so it would aim up into the sky. Because obviously I can't go into the sky and hold my light meter a mile in the air. No. So, you can use the light meter for both instances. But
you're implying now that the sky is only up there and not actually all around us. But anyway, ignore that.
But it is up there. But it only dawned on me the other day when you mentioned about how much you use a histogram, and I thought to myself, and that's really strange because I never use a histogram apart from when I call lazy landscape photography, because you simply have time.
Yeah, I could never go back from a histogram. I would never ever be able to. Obviously, I could do because if I go out and shoot film, obviously I have got a histogram, so I'm using the spot metering of an app basically via the camera. So I'm looking for sort of like a mid grey. So in a way, it's the same sort of thing. But if I knew there was an extreme dynamic range of that scene, I wouldn't be able to do that.
But that comes with experience, though, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So I would then do a meter reading of the sky, a meter reading and divide the two and find somewhere in the middle. So not difficult, but like you say, it's the benefit of experience. So if I was using a light meter and I literally just pointed at the brightest part of the scene, would that turn the brightest part of the scene to 20% grey, or do you have a compensation thing on it as well, or
no?
not?
There's no compensation.
So how? All right, I'll have to have a go, because I mean, it's interesting because you teach this, and I think if I was to teach anybody anything about exposure, and they didn't have a histogram, I would. I don't even think I have my light meter. I used to have a Sekonic 308 a long time ago for my studio work.
Yeah.
And that was great. But I was shown how to use it, and I used to work in a few different photography studios and literally use the settings with a plug-in flash sort of thing, and just meter for the back of the room, meter for the front of the room, and get, you know, obviously a different aperture for the back of the room, different aperture for the front of the room. So I knew what I was doing with it. But if I took that out of its environment and took it to a wedding, I went up to the bride and metered her face, and literally turned off my histogram. In fact, I can't, because I've got a screen anyway, so it'd be difficult to get or I did it with film camera. I'd literally crap myself, because I just don't feel.
It's a very strange thing to do the very first time.
Yeah, well, it's strange when you showed me. We were down in Pembrokeshire, weren't we? And we were photographing that. What was the name of that beach we went to? I can't even think. I can't remember. I couldn't remember when we were there, actually. So no chance now. I got it wrong, didn't I? But you were showing me how your focal point, when you moved it around, changed the focus, and I didn't know that existed. And I remember somebody actually commented on one of your videos saying that isn't the case. And I looked it up, and I think it's only a Canon thing. I've never seen that before.
Possibly.
Yeah. So you move your focal point around the frame, and the metering goes to the focal point.
Yes.
Even though the focal point was tiny.
Yeah. And I naturally assumed that every camera would work in exactly the same way. Bizarre, isn't it?
I'd never heard of that.
Yeah, it's really strange. I mean, don't get me wrong. When we teach wedding photography, I tell people, look, I'm going to teach you how I do it my way.
Yeah.
But then we're also going to set your camera up manually and do it without a light meter. So how I'd expect you to do it. So in other words, at that point, you can use a histogram if you wish, or also with a semi-automatic mode, because there are certain times, especially during a wedding, when you can get away when, by using a semi-automatic mode, like shutter speed priority, for instance. You know, when the people are mingling and you're going around taking your incidental shots of people laughing, giggling, and all the rest of it, then fine. I always tell people,
you use shutter priority then, do you?
Yeah, I always tell people, if you want to use aperture priority or use shutter speed priority, only do it if nothing will interfere with your light metering. In other words, if you're going to kneel down and aim up at people, now you've got a problem, because the sky is likely to interfere with your light metering. Do you know what I mean? Or if you've got a bright white wall behind your subjects when you're walking around, that white wall is likely to interfere with your light metering. So I always tell people, it's only the same with you, with your street photography. You're looking at the scene and making a conscious decision.
You do. You look for the brightest scene and they will meter
That's
for
correct.
that.
And more often than not, you tend to shoot in manual, don't you?
Always manual, yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
See, I shoot street photography in shutter speed priority more often than not.
I got really lazy the other day, and I can't remember what I was photographing, but I was going from different rooms all the time, and I just thought, I can't be bothered to put it in aperture priority. And by doing that, what I should have done was just go aperture priority but manual ISO, because I just didn't like the fact that I didn't feel confident, and I knew what my exposures were going to be. And I thought, no, as much as it's frustrating me going back and forth to different lighting, I thought, I've got to stick manual. I could have felt like I needed two cameras, leave one in one room and one in the other. It was really frustrating, but I just yeah. But the way I shoot, I'm really, really conscious of my histogram. I think it's probably my favourite bit of tech that's come into photography, and it just means that you haven't got to worry. I know I haven't got to worry about my exposures being clipped or whatever, unless I need them to be, but reflections and stuff like that. But yeah, I can't imagine going backwards unless I say, when I'm shooting film, I think I'd like to do that. I think we need to head out and do a shoot with the film camera, because have you got medium format as well or not?
Yeah, I've got both.
Yeah. So we need to head out, and you can show me how you do that with that, because I'd like to see that in practice. So we've mentioned this before about like the art of film photography and how it's sort of lost, and I feel like it's nice to sort of go out and do the old-fashioned way. It's easier to do it with a histogram, obviously. It's easier with all these mod cons, but it's like having an automatic car for the next 50 years, never needing to drive a manual car. It's like, but then getting in an old Mustang or something and going around a corner, you just feel amazing, wouldn't it? Just to feel the gearbox and all that sort of thing. So yeah.
I am an advocate of automatic cars, though.
Well, I think,
I
yeah.
hate sitting there with your foot in the clutch.
You drive a van.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah, that's so annoying. I tried to buy that van as an automatic. Because you can get them, apparently.
Can you?
Yeah, apparently so, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Good
apparently.
grief. Yeah.
Yeah, but a mechanic friend of mine said steer away from them because you do end up with all sorts of issues with the automatic.
Yeah, imagine it starts
gearboxes.
going wrong. It's going to be expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, but I do drive the van like as if it's a car, you know, because I don't fill it with 2 tons
Drive
worth
it like
of
it's
stuff.
a roller coaster, don't we?
Yeah, but it's quite interesting. But that's why I thought at the end of the day, wow, you know, I think people think that I've got something against mirrorless technology, and I certainly haven't. You know, my next camera, when I eventually buy another camera, it might well be a mirrorless, because we're all going to end up with mirrorless cameras, I imagine, at some point.
I don't know. I don't want DSLR to go.
I don't think it will.
Do you know what? It was in a camera shop when I bought the X100 the other day. I picked up that somebody had Partexed a D4S, and I've never held one, and it didn't have a lens on it, and it was in commanding cameras on the desk there, and I picked it up. I thought it's huge. You know, I always loved the big body SLRs. I've never owned one. I always wanted one. So I picked this thing up without a lens on it, and it didn't have a battery in it, and it didn't have a lens on it. But man, it did not weigh anything, and it felt so. I was like, if these ever go and they won't, you know, in 20 years' time they don't exist anymore, and they work, because I think people, these are selling for like 1,200 quid. They're no money. They're like ridiculously cheap, and it's like, oh, I'd love one. I really would. I think it's such a shame because these mirrorless cameras are so small.
I don't think they will go altogether.
I don't. No,
I don't. I think there'll be more of a hybrid. In other words, if you imagine, let's say, for instance, my Canon 5D Mark III, for instance, if I could flick a switch to switch an EVF on. If at some point an EVF was much more beneficial for me than just looking through glass, then I think that's perhaps the way it will go. Most cameras will go mirrorless, don't get me wrong. Most cameras will.
What's frustrating is like the new Nikon D6, I think it's just been announced, and obviously we've just had the Canon 1DX, the new one of them as well, and they keep comparing them to, I mean, these are $6,000 cameras, so these are hell of an investment. Now they keep comparing them to what's available in like the Sony the A9s and stuff like that, and those cameras now have been out a while, and you can get them for half the money. And quite often the mirrorless spec is better. But you've got to think, well, hang on, what is this? This is a DSLR, so it's obviously built to be more durable, sort of thing. It's a bigger thing. It's almost a different market, even though the specs are less. It's 3 times the price or double the price. Why? And it's hard sometimes for people to sort of see it as, if you ignore, because sometimes you've got to ignore specs, haven't you? It's all about the user experience. The specs aren't what make you buy the camera. Otherwise, everyone would probably have a Sony, you know. But when you actually own the Sony and use it, and the specs become irrelevant because you don't like holding the thing, or, you know, it just don't feel long time in the hand, whatever, the buttons don't feel right, whatever it is, the editing or something about it, you appreciate why these cameras are what they are. And it's not about the specs, it's about the way it's built, who it's aimed for, and
I agree totally. I do. Otherwise we'd all have the same camera,
exactly,
we'd all watch the same telly, and we'd all drive the same car. I
think, and I'm probably not alone in this, I think it's a conspiracy, because if you think about it, every camera that's come out, there's always something missing on it. It's like the new whatever comes out and it's only got one card slot, or the new whatever's got it hasn't got phase detect on it, it's only got contrast detect focusing.
It's got 4K, but it's heavily cropped.
I was thinking, why, if that technology has been around now in, say, 4 years, in the last four cameras from that other manufacturer, you've bought out a new camera 4 years down the line and it doesn't have it, but it has everything else that theirs don't. It's almost like they're in cahoots. And they're like bringing this, are you bringing that out with this? Don't, because we're going to bring one out with that, and we were going to omit this, so if you can put that in yours. It's like, surely this stage of technology, there should be no camera really without 2 card slots, without the best focusing, without ISO, without
all a standard.
Yeah, and it's like, it just seems like the new Fujifilm X-T4 has just been announced, and I can't, on paper, other than the flip screen, which doesn't appeal to me, on paper that camera looks perfect, bigger battery and everything nice, and it's like, well, when we get it, is there going to be something that is not on it? Because like somebody said, they've got rid of the headphone jack, which is already on the X-T3. This was already there. You've taken it away. No one asked you to. Why? Well, and it's like, and it's just, it's not one brand. It's all of them. It's frustrating. Like, you'll have the best camera, and it'll be a crop set. It'll be a Mark 4 thirds or something. And it's like, well,
But every car has electric windows. Every car has air conditioning now, pretty much.
yeah.
You know, I very much doubt it. Well, you're going to be hard pushed probably to buy a car that doesn't have air conditioning and has windy up windows. You know, I'm talking about new cars.
Yeah, you probably can't do it. No.
You probably can't do it because they all have
probably
those
costs
by
more to make that now because of the
Yeah,
See,
it's standard. But I suppose they're controlling the market, aren't they? That's why they bring out, you know, the EOS R is a brilliant camera. All the pros should buy it. Wait a minute, it's only got one card slot. I think they do that on purpose. In actual fact, it's pretty obvious that they do that on purpose because they know that when the launch of the 5D Mark V that comes out,
6 or whatever,
whatever,
they're
going to buy that because specs might be slightly less, but it's got
Yeah.
2 card slots, so it's going to appeal to that marketplace.
I always think that it's got to be a bit like playing a chess player. If you play somebody who doesn't know how to play chess, they're going to be looking at what you've just done and then just think, what shall I do next? If you play someone who's good at chess, they're always thinking 5 moves ahead.
Yeah.
So if you're in marketing, you'll think, right, okay, this technology's just been developed. So that technology that's just been developed is going to be in the camera 5 years down the line. So we'll start implementing that. So you're releasing 3 cameras before that or whatever.
Yeah.
But the technology that they're actually working on is ages down the line. So they've got to think, well, how can we sell the ones in between? Because there's the one 5 years down the line is the one is the main model that's coming out. So you're always playing. You're never gonna bring out a product. I mean, we're not just talking cameras here. You're never gonna bring out a car. Like, let's be honest, like the Tesla. They reckon that Tesla's business model now, is to have all these electric cars around the world all running on their batteries. Like Sony are doing with the sensors, they think that the future for Tesla and where they're going to make their money is that when everybody has an electric car, they'll all have Tesla batteries in it. Okay, so that's the long-term plan. So they're bringing out these cars left, right, and centre. They probably don't even care that they're not making any money or they're not selling any, because the bigger picture is in the future. We've got all this experience because we've been making these cars for so long. You guys have done the beta testing for us. So now the new cars come out. And BMW are bringing out one. Porsche have just bought out a battery-powered car, and it's supposed to be incredible. Wow. You know, and imagine if that's got a Tesla battery in it. It's just, you know, they're thinking.
Don't they have F1 now for just electric cars?
I think they do. Yeah.
I mean, that's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But there are people who will still drive engine vehicles.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But also it mustn't stop there because the technology is getting better and better and better with cameras. But that's a pointless exercise if the printers aren't getting better, if the screens aren't getting better.
It's all, you can almost argue about justification there, though, couldn't you? You could almost say, well, is any of this justifiable? Because, you know, printers, if you're going to print everything, then pretty much for the last 10 years you didn't need to buy a new camera because unless you're printing bigger than A2, you don't need bigger than a 12 megapixel camera. Unless you're going to get your files completely underexposed or you don't know what you're doing. You almost don't, unless you're one of these that lift the shadows up to the max and you need the Sony or whatever. But I don't think there's a camera that's been made in the last 10 years that really needs replacing. You can do a wedding with a camera that's 10 years old.
So true.
You stick a prime lens on it and you know what you're doing.
Well, really, we still use a Canon 5D Mark II.
I could use a Mark 1 now, Canon 5D Mark 1 as a wedding, for a wedding. I didn't have prime lenses when I had them cameras, so I didn't have the benefits of the 1.2 because I couldn't afford them. I was a studio photographer. I had, like you've got, a big room with kids running around, so you were shooting f8, f11 all the time. So I never justified the 1.2 lenses. But if I did, I probably would never have. At the time, you feel like you need to buy the newer camera because it's got a better ISO. Well, if you'd have bought their 1.2 lenses or 1.8 lenses or whatever you needed to, you could have easily shot. Yeah, they're better now. Don't get me wrong. Good grief, they're miles better now. 1600 years ago, if I shot a wedding on 5D Mark 1 at 1600, I was dreading editing them pictures. 1600 ISO, I was dreading it. But now, flipping out, I do street photography at 6400. It's not an issue.
We do still use a Canon 5D Mark II. The wife uses the Canon 5D Mark II. I use a Canon 5D Mark III and a 1DX, and she uses the Canon 5D Mark II.
But I'm sure people will be watching and listening to this now saying, well, yeah, I still shoot with a crop sensor camera from the, I don't know, from 1,000 years ago or whatever like that, and it still does me, and it does. You know, there's no, it's a bit frustrating when I see these YouTube videos saying, is this camera still good 5 years down the line? Well, it was very good when it came out. Have you all of a sudden gone crap? Because I'm sure the camera's going to be just as competent now.
Magazines are still being printed on the same paper, aren't they?
Well, yeah.
So at the end of the day, and like I said to you earlier, I've got hundreds of magazines sat through there. You can go and check yourself, and you can pick any one of them up and look through it, and it might be a 7-year-old magazine, and the picture looks fantastic, shot with a Canon 5D. And you think to yourself, well, that's not going to look any worse now if you went out with the same Canon 5D. And it's not going to look much worse compared to, you know, all the brand new cameras that are out now.
Yeah, we're not going to get any job. If we go applying for jobs now, working in the marketing team of Fujifilm or Canon and everything like that.
Canon or Nikon,
we're pretty much going to be laughed out the room. Like, but so go on then, Gary Goff. What would you want to see in a camera that you don't have? Ignoring the whole mirrorless thing.
I need to ask you because I don't know.
So is there anything that you think of? Do you know what? Even if it's like impossible, what would you? Because I mean, dynamic range is nuts now. I don't think if dynamic range got any better, I think people would be too inclined to go nuts with their editing. And I think if you expose a camera properly now, the quality's already there, even in a crop sensor. I think Micro Four Thirds struggles a bit, but you got to be careful. I'd never used one, but what I hear is I think you've got to be careful with the dynamic range on them. It's certainly got to be with the ISO. But what would you say you would jump up and down about? Is anything that would get you excited about technology that could come into a camera?
This is going to work well on a podcast, isn't it? I can't think of anything that I'd really like. I'll ask you the same question again in a second, because obviously something's burning on your mind. But I wish that the semi-automatic modes were more consistent, shall we say? Because even though I use good cameras, I've always used good cameras, I still find that when I put my camera into a semi-automatic mode,
as in like shutter priority, that sort of thing. Yeah,
there's too much up and down. You know, with manual, you get full consistency with it.
What metering mode is your camera in though when you do that?
Well, no, I tend to use spot metering.
That's why then.
Metering. No, I totally get that. But I still want more consistency with it.
Yeah, take it out of spot metering.
No, I use spot metering.
But that's where you're going to get your inconsistencies.
No, I totally get that.
Yeah,
I totally get that.
So you've answered your own question.
Yeah. But I'm fishing for something to say because
I've gone from fixing Paul's tripod to fixing your camera. No,
I tell people exactly the same thing. If you use spot metering, then you are prone to images that are going to be darker and lighter and so on and so forth. I do know and understand that. But no, I can't honestly.
Well, you'd have to go mental with your compensation if you're doing that, because one minute you'd be pointing at something dark and you've got to switch it to -2. The next thing you've got to, So that's why I literally don't do.
If I use my compensation, it's because I've used my eyes looking at the scene, and like I said earlier, I'm going to shoot a subject standing there, and in the background I know there's nothing, because it's still on a helipad, for instance. There's nothing but sky. So I know through my
what sort of events are you standing at?
No, I know through my own skill set that I'm going to have to overexpose that image by perhaps a stop and a third. So I'll do that and take pictures. I won't take pictures and then check my results. I never do that. That's not how I work.
Okay.
That's not how I work. I'm not saying how I work is the right way, by the way. So please don't read into the fact that I'm telling you this is how you should be working. No, I don't work like that. I never have done. Landscape photography, yes, because again, you have time for that. I never look at the back of my camera when I'm working. Never. For clients, especially on weddings. I think it looks terrible. It looks very amateurish. And I might be wrong, by the way, with me saying that.
Well, everybody's got a style, don't they? I mean, if you want to, I don't know, for whatever reason you want to check something, but I would do that, I suppose, if I'm tracking something and somebody's just done something that they've moved, and I think I've got a minute just to make sure that I got that tracking motion. Because if they're standing still doing like an interaction at a wedding or an event or something, I don't need to worry about the focus being in it sharp. But if somebody's just ran towards me, I think, right, I need to check that, because the rest of the event wasn't based on tracking. Then that's something I probably would look at straight away in case I needed to reenact it. Because something like the bride running towards the confetti shot, that sort of stuff, I'd always get that shot and then just take a couple of seconds just to have a quick look at that, make sure that that's probably the only time. I think street photography's definitely taught me that chimping is bad, because you do miss stuff, and like you say, you're not interacting with guests, and that's what you're partly paid to do in it. Obviously. Yeah. So, but technology-wise, there's nothing that you feel you there's nothing like in other brands that you think, I wish the Canon had that.
I honestly don't.
Because you don't.
What's on your mind? Because
If you shoot handheld, what's the
Yes.
slowest shutter you'll shoot handheld? But say now you're on a 24-70. So what's the slowest shutter?
usually about 100th of a second.
Right. So
Unless my ISO is screaming,
all right. So you would benefit from IBIS then.
as in.
Well, if you're shooting at 100, you zoomed in at 75 mil or 100 and 104 your lens, isn't it? 105, sorry.
105,
yeah. So if you zoomed in at 105 and you're shooting 100th of a second with IBIS, you obviously and they're not moving. You're standing still. They're standing still. You'd benefit from IBIS. But there's nothing. I mean, obviously,
What are you calling IBIS?
in-body image stabilization.
Oh no, my lenses are stabilized, but not in body. No,
Yeah, but you're going to get a lot sharper. You'd probably handhold that at 30.
I've never used it. No, so I don't know the benefit.
It's. I mean, the way I shoot, I don't go below 200th. I really don't. Very rarely 1/25th. I mean, I'm wary of that. And my XT3 doesn't have IBIS. In fact, none of them. Only the Sony has IBIS. But I definitely think that cameras should have a redundancy memory.
Yeah, I
definitely think
I forgot about that.
even if they say, look, what's happened? Oh, my camera's died. All right, I've lost all the memory on the back of it as well. I mean, I think it's normally recoverable, isn't it? They can normally get it back.
Yeah.
I think as long as they're selling it on the basis that they're not accepting any liability for
Cameras shouldn't have card slots. Card slots are archaic.
Yeah, but how would you change the memory? You go on traveling for 12 months. How are you going to change it? You got to have a memory card because you got to take something out of the camera. I mean, if like we're filming
you
here now,
you have it on a laptop.
Yeah, but how would I change if we want to carry on filming now?
Yeah.
I've got to take a memory card out of that, put a new memory card out and carry on filming. How are we going to do that without memory?
I get that, but that's the same as a laptop. With a laptop, you have a set amount of memory, but then you have ports where you can add extra. So if you had a 4 terabyte,
You can't walk around with a hard drive dangling out your camera.
No, but if you had a 4 terabyte hard drive built into that, or a 2 terabyte or a 1 terabyte hard drive, that would do your filming all day without any issues whatsoever.
You would. If I had, all my 4 or 8 terabyte hard drives are full, and I'd walk around then with a camera with a 4 terabyte hard drive in it, like full all the time.
Well, that's more fool you.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that's something you shouldn't do, isn't it? You think, I won't bother taking the photographs off there. They're fine. I'll do it next week or whatever sort of thing. You, as a backup, I think they should have some sort of built-in tiny 64 gig or something. And my drone has got a built-in 8 gig, I think it has.
Yeah.
One of my little.
I agree totally. By the way.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. The other thing is resolution. I don't think all cameras should have sort of 28 megapixels, 45 megapixels and stuff like that. But what it would be awesome, I don't know if this is possible, but when I started reading about the D850 coming out, the Nikon D850, it's got to be 3 years old now, isn't it? I seen it as a 50 megapixel full frame camera and I thought, do you know what? Imagine if that camera came out with the ability to shift pixels so that you could decide if you wanted to use that camera at 50, 24 or 12. So still a full frame. So the actual pixels merge. And all of a sudden you've got one camera which can be massive because you don't want to photograph a wedding with a 50 megapixel camera. You want to do it with a 24 or 28 or that sort of thing. And then if you want to go, if you're going to a low light event, you might need 12. So that I don't know if it's possible. If anybody's watching or listening to think that this is completely impossible because the pixels wouldn't merge together, but to make the pixels.
Is that the same as a switch for a crop?
No. So the pixels will be physically bigger.
Okay.
As opposed to the sensor being smaller, because you can have obviously a crop sensor camera which is 50 megapixel. That's just the physical size.
No, I'm talking about the other way around. If you've got a full frame camera, but let's say for instance you've only got your 100mm lens with you, I need more of a reach. Not that you're going to get more of a reach, but if there was a switch that you could switch.
Oh yeah, you can do that. Yeah, you can do that. You can just turn the camera from full frame into a crop sensor, and it'll zoom in and turn that lens into 150mm. Yeah, you can do that now anyway. But obviously you're losing.
Well, it won't. But you'll get a crop at 1.5.
Yeah, but it will give you the effective view of a 150.
No, it'll give you 100mm cropped at 1.5. You can't change glass. You can't physically change glass.
I see what you mean. No, the effect of the lens.
But you get the
Sorry,
effect.
the effect of the lens.
Yeah.
Right, okay, I'm with you. I've lost me for a minute there.
Yeah.
But no, just the idea that the physical size of the sensor stays at 35mm.
Right.
Okay.
So
but each dot that makes up them 50 megapixels now becomes slightly bigger. So on a 12 megapixel sensor that's full frame, they're bigger. eyeballs, so to speak, that that read the light are bigger than they were if they were 50 megapixel. That's why on low light, your 50 megapixel camera suffers.
But then wouldn't they advertise the camera then as 100 megapixel and not 50 megapixel?
No, it starts at the maximum at 50,
right,
and then it goes down. So the pixels get bigger. Because they're getting bigger, you're getting less of them.
Okay.
Because you've still got the same width of sensor.
Okay.
Yeah. So it starts off at 50. When they get bigger, it goes down and down and down and down till the pixels are like effectively 12 megapixel. And I just think that, I don't know if this is possible, but the idea of having a camera that starts off at 50 megapixel and you can say, on a JPEG, you can decide if you're shooting at high res or low res, that sort of thing. But that's obviously just compression. But if the pixels were able to merge together to actually get pixel shift, so they can do pixel shift. Well, the pixel shift was one of the things that planted this seed in my head, so that if a pixel can shift over to the side to read an image again, and then they merge them two together to make it a bigger, couldn't it do the opposite and make it 50 megapixel camera 12 megapixel, and it'd be better in low light? Because obviously people might be thinking, why would you want a 12 megapixel camera? Well, obviously the bigger the I can't think of the name of them now, but the bigger the pixels, the more light sensitivity they're going to be.
Right.
So that's why you have the A7S, for example. The Sony A7S is a 12 megapixel camera.
I'm not buying this, by the way. You're not enthusing me with it.
You wouldn't.
No, I'm not. I'm still struggling to understand what you're saying.
So if you've got,
so you're 50.
If a sensor's an inch wide,
that sensor there is exactly 50 mil built up.
Yeah.
50 meg.
35.
50 meg.
Yeah.
50 meg, right? In there.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is you want to make the picture smaller but more concentrated.
No.
So there's still okay.
So the picture's the same size.
Right.
It's just that each dot that makes up the picture would be bigger, and because each dot's bigger, it would be more sensitive to light.
Right.
So imagine a full frame camera now. You take the Sony A7S lens off. You take a D850.
So what size would that 50 meg file be then?
Well, the 50 meg file will still be 8,000 pixels or whatever it is.
And it's still a 50 meg file size?
Yeah, to start when you select 50 meg. But then when you select 12 meg,
okay,
it's not the res that you're changing so much. You're not shooting 12 megapixel because you want a smaller raw file. Yeah. You're shooting it so that the pixels the eyeballs of the sensor are bigger and it's better in low light.
Okay.
Sony wouldn't make an A7S, an A7R, an A7R and an A7 III. There's 3 cameras that Sony make, and an A9 obviously, which is 20 megapixel. But they wouldn't make the A7S and the A7R if they could make the R do what the S does. And they're both full frame sensors. One's a 12 megapixel or 16, whatever it is, and the other one's a 40 something megapixel. But one is going to be noticeably better in low light, even though they're all full frame.
Right, okay.
I think I don't know if it's possible, but if you could start off with a 40 something megapixel.
Jesus.
Do you know that would be it's just epic. Because you could buy a 50 megapixel camera and think, well, I'm shooting a wedding this weekend, so let's put it on 24 mode. Or I'm doing astro photography tonight, let's put it on 12 megapixel mode. Or filming in low light, let's put it in 12.
I fail to understand the difference between that and saving it as different size raw files, because you can save it as different size raw files.
Because it's not the size of the file that's the problem. It's the size of the sensors in the. Sorry, it's the size of the. In the sensor, each dot would be. If you made a 35mm sensor now, which was 100 megapixel, the dots are getting smaller again, just to give you that res. But if you made it 10 megapixel on a full frame, the dots are a lot bigger. So they're going to be better in low light. That's why people buy A7S as opposed to an A7R.
Okay.
So you'd have to have 2 cameras. You'd have to have one for low light, and you'd have to have one for landscape photography or high res stuff.
Couldn't you have an easier wish list than that?
No. I know, because it'd be that camera would,
no.
if that I want it.
No.
If that camera came out, it would cost like 100 grand, because that would be the end of. But it has to be possible. I think it has to be possible. I don't. That in my memory, and I'll be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thinking about it, it does seem really, really archaic how there isn't memory built into a camera at all.
You don't have CD players in cars anymore, do you?
No, because you could actually have a terabyte.
Yeah, but you wouldn't.
But you could. There's no rhyme or reason why not.
But where's the backup of that?
No, the backup isn't the issue. The backup isn't the problem of the camera manufacturers. That's just down to your stupidity. No, but if you want to run for weeks and weeks and weeks,
but if you went out and shot
weddings,
you've just bought the camera.
Yeah.
You go out and you do one wedding with it. Literally, you've just bought the camera, so it's got no memory on it, and it fails. Yeah. There's no backup of that. even though it's SSD, solid state, the memory, there still needs to be 2 of it. So you've got it built into the camera. That's great, which is what I want. But you still need a removable one, so that you can. So you've got a physical.
Yeah, but I'm
not
not
physical anyway.
Yeah, but I'm not saying I'm not saying not to do that. But that would also solve your 2 card slot problems. Because if every camera had 1 card slot but inbuilt memory, now all of a sudden you could shoot a wedding and take the picture on your memory card and on the memory built into the camera. There now is your redundancy. There's your backup.
Right.
So that would work. Now, obviously, then it's up to you as a user to go home and download all the pictures off your camera and download them off your memory card. That's you as a user.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's a built-in hard drive,
Yeah.
a solid state, and a memory card.
Yeah.
Because I mean, surely a solid state doesn't need to be. I mean, if you can get a micro SD the size of a postage, not half the size of a postage stamp, why can't they fit that in a camera?
Yeah.
And you can get. I seen on Amazon a 400 gig SanDisk micro SD card for less than 50 quid.
Yeah.
Surely, if you give me 100 gig inbuilt and charge me an extra 100 quid for it, I'm happy. I just think even if it got 2 card slots, I think you should still have that. But yeah, so that's my wish list.
I agree.
That is my wish list.
That's a much better wish list than your other one.
What is my other one? The dots.
Don't go there again.
You don't think so? I think that'd be fantastic. They won't do it because obviously it'll be the end of their industry because they never need to sell another camera again. But I just think it'd be really cool if you could do that.
I think what would be cool is if they moved away from the 35mm full frame and almost like medium format became the standard, and maybe it will in the future. Maybe medium formats, and all of a sudden you're talking, if you want to, flick a switch and now it's 130 meg every picture. Would you want it? I don't know. That's a debate for another time.
Right, but what's the problem with medium format over 35mm and over crop sensors? Why are crop sensors so popular then? It's not the size of the camera because you can...
Well, no, crop sensors are more popular because they're cheaper.
The lenses are cheaper to make.
No, pretty much everything's cheaper if you buy.
It is, but the actual if money wasn't the issue and you were just given the camera, the issue with things like with medium format is things like depth of field. You're shooting at f8 just to get an f4 depth of field. If you go into an indoor environment, the low light's going to struggle. So
scientifically things would change, but I'm wondering what will be the next innovation. Obviously,
well, if anything, it should be smaller. It should be going smaller because photography 200 years more, 200 years ago, we're shooting 8x10s and plates and stuff like that. So now sensors they've obviously everything went down to large format, then medium format, then 35mm.
Yeah.
So it should be going smaller. We should micro four thirds should be the way it's going.
Yeah.
I don't think it will. I think 35mm. I hope 35mm is never goes because you compromise on things like bokeh.
Well, I mean, with technology kicking in the way it is,
but
maybe everything will be micro four thirds. That will be your new full frame
it won't
camera.
No. I don't think it ever will because I think the shooting. I mean, obviously I shoot medium. I've got medium format camera, but obviously that's film. But shooting digitally in 35mm and crop sensor, I don't think I've ever owned a micro four thirds. I know what the files are going to look like at f4 from a crop sensor and from a full frame. So like us filming here now, I know I can focus on me and you at 2.8, and I've got the depth of field of an f4 35mm.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. If I was filming on a medium format size sensor now at f4, that's out of focus by a mile.
Most people won't relate to that, though. Most people won't relate to that.
But that's when you buy a tool, you buy it for its...
Yeah, but I almost guarantee you, I might be wrong, but most people won't relate to that. Most people will buy a camera, look through the viewfinder, and take a picture of what they see. Whether it's micro four thirds, whether it's full frame, or whether it's medium format.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll be a bit more. It's obviously not.
We're talking technically.
Yeah. Well, yeah. How are you going to sell something? If that's the case, then why are they inventing cameras? Because a camera from 10 years ago is going to do that.
Oh no, absolutely. But
there's no point buying a new camera.
I think my Canon G7X Mark II. I think that's micro four thirds. I'm not quite sure because it's just a small handheld thing. I'm not really sure. But when I want to go, when I want to go taking pictures,
it's a 1-inch sensor in that, I think.
I look through my viewfinder and you see what you see and you take a picture and that's it, end of story. I mean, really, there's not many people who are interested in shallow depth of field. There aren't. Obviously, yes,
professionals are.
Yes, there's going to be some people, but not many. And probably people who will listen to this podcast, I bet there's going to be very few who are really, really interested in a shallow depth of field. And in which case, if it's micro four thirds, medium format, or full frame, it probably doesn't matter a hoot.
Well, that's actually interesting because I imagine, now I get this all the time. Now, I must have sold loads of Fuji cameras based on from my videos and stuff. And people saying, "Oh, I watched your video, so I've bought the Fuji because I like the colours you get and I like the way it works and everything." And I get asked a lot for my recommendations with the Fuji system. I also get a lot of people saying, "I would buy the Fuji system if it was full frame." Now, when you start speaking to these people and say, "Oh, what interesting? What do you shoot then?"
Yeah.
"Oh, just landscape photography and occasional whatever." Kids and families, that sort of stuff. "Oh, do you do any portraits?" "No." "Do you do any like low light stuff?"
No.
And you start asking them everything that's important when buying a full frame camera.
Yeah.
And obviously you get a look with the full frame and you get like a slight separation and all that sort of thing, and there is a look difference. But you can't tell me that people that are buying full frame, you'll get people that say, "I'm going to get a new camera, I want to upgrade my crop sensor, Nikon or whatever like that, but I want to go full frame," which means they've got to change their lenses and all this as well.
Yeah.
I think, why are you doing that? What, I just want a better camera, but you're still going to be photographing landscape. So in a way, you're going backwards because of the crop sensor. You're getting better depth of field, so you can focus at infinity, and the foreground's going to be pretty much sharp all the time. Whereas if you went full frame, you're going to notice that you're not going to be able to do that, and things like the depth of field is an issue. So a lot of time, people are buying cameras thinking, "I'm going full frame because it's an upgrade." Well, actually, if it's for landscape photography and most of the things that people shoot, that's why I love my Fuji system, because it just does everything because it's a crop sensor.
Yeah.
The Sony, I will pick up if I specifically need bokeh or to blur the background or low light. I think low light is definitely still far better on a full frame camera, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, most people, got to be careful how you say this, but most people, I imagine, will strive to own a full frame camera because it's the perceived notion that it's a better
Exactly
camera.
right, yeah. Exactly right, yeah.
Because all professionals will use, most professionals will
So we need
use
to
a full
invent
frame
a large frame digital camera. We'll be millionaires, aren't we?
Yeah,
Really? Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Bigger is better.
Yeah.
But then you've got the size of bigger lenses and everything that come with it, more expensive lenses that come with it. So people buy into the full frame system. We're going on to a different subject altogether, obviously, but buying into a full frame system is a lot more expensive. Crop sensor lenses are smaller, cheaper, lighter, more convenient, easier to carry. You know, there's a lot really to unless you need it. Unless you need the full frame.
But if you laid out pictures from now to 10 years ago, you know, going back over the history of you taking pictures, I'm not talking about, you know, you've got more skill set now. I'm talking about with the cameras and the pictures you took.
You wouldn't tell them that.
Yeah, well, I mean, what really is the difference?
There isn't one, no.
Because if there was a big difference, right, then every magazine would only have pictures in it that were taken on a Nikon D850 because that is the camera to have. Everything else apart from a Nikon D850 is substandard.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's never going to be the case. No. Whether it's me as a Canon fanboy or you as a Fujifilm or a Sony, it's never going to be that way, is it? We all love what we love, but at the end of the day, do we really need to upgrade, especially as often as we do?
Absolutely not. No way. But it's like cars, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've had it for a while. You know, something new and shiny's coming out. I want it.
I have mine forever. I'm never interested.
Yeah. I funny enough, actually, with my last car, my recent car I've just gotten out, because we've both got Volkswagens and we both sort of change them every 3 years. It feels like I'm changing. It's the same with the cameras. It feels like I'm changing them every 15 minutes. Like Gareth is saying now, my car is due to change this year. I'm thinking, flipping, I've only just got mine. I've got to go through this whole process of researching cars and all this sort of thing.
Why do you change your car every 3 years? Well, lots of people do that, but why?
Yeah. Well, she always wants.
You lease them?
No, PCP or whatever they are. Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
So you just pay a monthly, and then you pay a deposit, and then you pay it over 3 years, and then you put that back, and then
leasing then.
Well, I can lease because
there's nothing wrong with leasing.
No, I can lease because
I shouldn't say.
No, it's you can keep the car at the end, with a lease you have to hand it back. You can't keep the car with a lease. It has to transfer ownership. So we could keep the car and get paid a balloon if we wanted to, but it just seems I've decided to go 4 years with my car because I can't stand buying new cars. I hate it. I do. I hate it. I hate buying new cars. So with my camera, I remember my first camera was a 20D when I first started professionally on my own. That was a 20D, and I must have had that 3 or 4 years before I went into the 5D. Whenever the 5D Mark 1 came out, I'm sure somebody's going to comment. I got that pretty much 6 months after that came out, and then the 5D Mark II. And it didn't feel like every 15 minutes you're buying a new camera, whereas now it does. Like the Fujifilm X-T4 is just going to be, it's just been announced, and it's like, do I need it? And you start trying to justify it to yourself. You think, actually, on this occasion, I'm not, other than the IBIS, which I absolutely love because I do a lot of handheld video with my Fujis. I have to use the Sony for its IBIS when I'm doing that, and I hate that. So I'd love it for the IBIS and the better battery.
Do you know what?
I can't buy a £1,500 camera for IBIS and battery. I can't.
I'm not sure if I mentioned this on one of my previous videos, but I just interviewed a guy called Mike Brown, a fantastic photographer, and his body language changed and everything. We talked about photography. He was all over it like a rash, fantastic. But the minute you started talking about cameras,
Gear.
really not interested.
Nah.
He's not. He just like, why are we even having this conversation?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't give a toss about the camera gear you're using. It's about the person behind the camera.
Cool. It's what's in the frame, not what's in your hand.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, because basically you're talking about money. That's the problem. And you talk about gear, you talk about money. Because if you weren't talking about money, you'd just go out and buy everything. You'd go out and buy a large format Leica or whatever. You know, a Hasselblad this and put a digital back.
I know people who do that.
Yeah.
What are you looking at time for?
Just to see.
You've got 4 minutes left.
4 minutes of time. Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it?
Yeah. So there are people who do that, but at the end of the day, are they better photographers for it?
Well, let's
Absolutely
put it this
not.
way. I mean, like, we've got the photo show coming up in a couple of weeks, and I can't wait for the photo show because of the social aspect of it. I see loads of people I know.
I've not been for years.
I love it. It's a great opportunity to meet, and we're staying over in the hotel. It's going to be a great piss up afterwards as well. It's going to be good. It's really, really good. But when you
thanks for my invite.
You're not having one.
Yeah.
It's in the post.
Yeah.
But the thing is when you get there, you think psychologically straight away, you're like, oh, let's walk around and see what's new. You don't need anything, but you're looking to see what's new. And as soon as you're standing in front of something new, you think, oh, it's got this. Oh, that's interesting. And they're already, the seed's there, and you start convincing yourself that maybe you need it. But like you say, for the last 10 years, you've not really needed to buy anything. Lenses, especially lenses, you can buy some of the 10-year-old Nikon glass and Canon glass is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's as long as you're not shooting high megapixel cameras, I think the res of them suffers. They're just brilliant. They're bargain. They're just like second-handing it for nothing, and it's just incredible.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great.
And when you actually start looking at buying mirrorless Nikon, you've got to adapt the old lenses, which basically adds a problem to the mix, sort of thing. You know, it's difficult. It's difficult.
But it doesn't interest me. I've not been to the camera show or a camera show for years and years. It just doesn't interest me. Isn't it bizarre? Doesn't interest me. I'd be more interested in going and buying a printer.
Now,
than anything else.
Printer's something, though, that you could mention the same thing. You could say, what's come out with a printer that's changed? Because I brought a Canon R2400 a long time ago, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, whenever it came out. And that was an expensive printer. And I see them on eBay now for 300, 400 quid. No, less than that, probably 100 quid. But they're everywhere. And that printer was phenomenal. It printed black and white. It had 3 blacks. It had a light black, a light black, and a black. So it printed...
A light black?
Yeah. That's what it was. Black, a light black, light black, and black. And it printed phenomenal black and whites. No slight hint or anything. It was truly black and white. See, like, you're thinking, hang on, the only reason I don't use that anymore is because the rip in the print in the computer won't use it. I had to buy the new version. I think I bought the Pro 10S Canon.
Wow.
And I think that printer's still sat on the shelf. It never put a foot wrong. It still works fine, but I can't get the rip to work on the new version of the Mac.
Wow. Right, well, there you go then. So basically, you're a magpie then. You've got more money than sense, and you just keep buying new.
I haven't got more money than sense. I'm very good at justifying product purchases.
Oh right, yeah,
and
yeah,
hiding
yeah,
them.
Yeah. Not to me, you're not. Just be thankful you're not married to me.
Hey.
Yeah.
Interesting debate. I'm glad you're on my side with my big sensor.
With whatever it was you were talking about.
Hopefully, somebody that's watching this will probably go, actually, that's a good idea, Gareth. I like what you're thinking.
Great idea.
Well, anyway, thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think, and hopefully it's not just me.
Yeah. Cheers.